On behalf of the Irish Studies program at UC Berkeley, I'd like to welcome you to our event and thank you for spending your time with us today. This is a historic moment in the United States and internationally. Massive protests against police violence are bringing about a moment of reckoning in which we are reconsidering the workings of our institutions and in which we're revising our relationships to power. At this event, we're celebrating the work of James Joyce, and I want to talk here about the context in which he was writing and the kinds of characters he placed at the center of his book. Joyce's moment is very different to ours, but he wrote Ulysses at a moment of massive change, when the traditional scripts of sexuality, religion, and authority were being questioned, and when Ireland was fighting to shake off colonial rule by the English. In the years Joyce composed Ulysses, Ireland saw the Easter Rising in 1916 and the War of Independence from 1919 to 1921. The struggle for Irish freedom was also a conceptual struggle. Joyce writes in English, the language of the master, but he makes it his own through the stylistic and formal innovations of Ulysses in order to represent Irish people to themselves and to the world. The challenges this book presents to readers are the result of its refusal to follow conventions, its rejection of given narratives. Ulysses presents hitherto unrepresented perspectives, and it constructs new ways of conceiving social relations. Joyce doesn't give us answers for the challenges we face today, but his creation of a sense of openness and possibility is a source of inspiration and hope in our shared struggle to improve our society. In Bloom, Joyce creates a protagonist who's not a pure-blooded Irish person, but someone who experiences prejudice and hostility from Irish people because of his foreign blood. Bloom's wife, Molly, is also an outsider in Ireland. In devising these characters, Joyce resists nativist answers to colonial rule and explores instead other hybrid perspectives. In his work, identity and belonging are not found in a retrospective, nostalgic focus on images of pure origins, but are rather to be forged in the present moment in an open, inclusive, questioning, and generative way. We very much hope that you'll enjoy the readings today, all produced during our COVID-19 quarantine. We have an entertaining and thought-provoking selection of passages and a wonderful lineup of readers. Before the readings begin, let me hand you over to the Consul General in Los Angeles, Orla Keane.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you all for joining us today and for tuning in to our virtual Bloomsday. On behalf of the Irish consulates in Los Angeles and San Francisco, I would like to thank our friends in the Irish Studies program at UC Berkeley for partnering with us on this event. This year is a little different from previous events as we are unable to gather physically. James Joyce himself once wrote, "Real adventures do not happen to people who remain at home. They must be sought abroad." Taking this advice literally in 2020 is a challenge. However, the mind can always wander even when the body cannot. So we will seek our real adventures today through the performances that we're about to see and hear, which will transport us right back to Joyce's Dublin. Ireland is justifiably proud of James Joyce. The book we are reading this evening has a good claim to being the greatest novel of all time. Although Ulysses is in many ways the quintessential Dublin novel, it is nonetheless imbued with the spirit of internationalism that was the hallmark of so much of Joyce's work. His sense of being at home in locations well beyond the island of Ireland is something with which many of you joining us this evening can probably identify. I would like to thank our wonderful readers participating from Berkeley, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, and Dublin. So enjoy the show.
Thank you so much, Orla Keane. Our first reader, Senator David Norris, is a member of the Irish Seanad, a scholar of Irish literature, and a civil rights activist. In his office in Dublin, David Norris has recorded his reading of the opening of Ulysses. Ulysses begins in a Martello Tower in Sandy Cove, on the southern edge of Dublin Bay. One of the novel's most colourful characters, Buck Mulligan, carries his shaving kit up onto the roof of the tower and proceeds to shave in a parody of the Catholic Mass. While he shaves, he addresses Stephen Dedalus, who watches in quiet irritation. They discuss Haynes, an Englishman who's staying with them in the tower.
Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Introibo ad altare Dei." Halted, he peered down the dark winding stairs and called out coarsely, "Come up, Kinch! Come up, you fearful Jesuit!" Solemnly, he came forward and mounted the round gun rest. He faced about and blessed gravely thrice the tower, the surrounding land, and the awaking mountains. Then, catching sight of Stephen Dedalus, he bent towards him and made rapid crosses in the air, gurgling in his throat and shaking his head. Stephen Dedalus, displeased and sleepy, leaned his arms on the top of the staircase and looked coldly at the shaking, gurgling face that blessed him, equine in its length, and at the light untonsured hair grained and hued like pale oak. Buck Mulligan peeped an instant under the mirror and then covered the bowl smartly. "Back to barracks," he said sternly. He added in a preacher's tone, "For this so dearly beloved is the genuine Christine, body and soul and blood and wounds. Slow music, please. Shut your eyes, gents. One moment. A little trouble about those white corpuscles. Silence all." He peered sideways up and gave a long, slow whistle of call, then paused a while in rapt attention, his even, white teeth glistening here and there with gold points. Chrysostomos. Two strong, shrill whistles answered through the calm. "Thanks, old chap," he cried briskly. "That will do nicely. Switch off the current, will you?" He skipped off the gun rest and looked gravely at his watcher, gathering about his legs the loose folds of his gown. The plump, shadowed face and sullen oval jowl recalled a prelate, patron of arts in the Middle Ages. A pleasant smile broke quietly over his lips. "The mockery of it," he said gaily. "Your absurd name, an ancient Greek." He pointed his finger in friendly jest and went over to the parapet, laughing to himself. Stephen Dedalus stepped up, followed him wearily halfway, and sat down on the edge of the gun rest, watching him still as he propped his mirror on the parapet, dipped the brush in the bowl, and lathered cheeks and neck. Buck Mulligan's gay voice went on. "My name is absurd too, Malachi Mulligan, 2 dactyls, but it has a Hellenic ring, hasn't it? Tripping and sunny like the Buck himself. We must go to Athens. Will you come if I can get the aunt to fork out 20 quid? He laid the brush aside and, laughing with delight, cried, "Will he come, the jejune Jesuit?" Ceasing, he began to shave with care. "Tell me, Mulligan," Stephen said quietly. "Yes, my love? How long is Haynes going to stay in this tower?" Buck Mulligan showed a shaven cheek over his right shoulder. "God, isn't he dreadful," he said frankly. "A ponderous Saxon. He thinks you're not a gentleman. God, these bloody English, bursting with money and indigestion. Because he comes from Oxford. You know, Dedalus, you have the real Oxford manner. He can't make you out. Oh, my name for you is the best. Kinch, the knife blade."
Our next reader is Austin Williams, a Berkeley-based artist, a graduate in English and philosophy at UC Berkeley, and a former student of Trinity College, Dublin. In this passage, while Buck Mulligan swims in the 40-foot near Martello Tower, Stephen tries to explain to Haynes the institutions that constrain and limit his existence. The cigarette case Haynes flourishes is a symbol of British dominion over Ireland.
Haynes stopped to take out a smooth silver case in which twinkled a green stone. He sprang it open with his thumb and offered it. "Thank you," Stephen said, taking a cigarette. Haynes helped himself and snapped the case to. He put it back in his side pocket and took from his waistcoat pocket a nickel tinderbox, sprang it open too, and, having lit his cigarette, held the flaming spunk towards Stephen in the shell of his hands. Yes, of course, he said, as they went on again. Either you believe or you don't, isn't it? Personally, I couldn't stomach that idea of a personal God. You don't stand for that, I suppose. You behold in me, Stephen said with grim displeasure, a horrible example of free thought. He walked on, waiting to be spoken to, trailing his ash plant by his side. Its ferrule followed lightly on the path, squealing at his heels. My familiar, after me, calling, Stephen! I, wavering line along the path. They will walk on it tonight, coming here in the dark. He wants that key. It is mine. I paid the rent. Now I eat his salt bread. Give him the key too, all. He will ask for it. That was in his eyes. After all, Haynes began. Stephen turned and saw that the cold gaze which had measured him was not all unkind. After all, I should think you are able to free yourself. You are your own master, it seems to me. I am a servant of two masters, Stephen said, an English and an Italian. Italian, Haynes said, a crazy queen, old and jealous. Kneel down before me. And a third, Stephen said, there is who wants me for odd jobs. Italian? Haynes said again. What do you mean? The Imperial British State, Stephen answered, his color rising, and the Holy Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church. Haynes detached from his underlip some fibers of tobacco before he spoke. I can quite understand that, he said calmly. An Irishman must think that, like that, I dare say. We feel in England that we have treated you rather unfairly. It seems history is to blame.
Our next reader is Sonia Macari. Born in Cove, County Cork, of Irish and Italian parents. Sonia is an award-winning actor with an illustrious career in film, television, and advertising. From her home in Los Angeles, she's reading for us today the opening of chapter 4, where we first meet Leopold Bloom in the kitchen of his home on 7 Eccles Street, on the north side of Dublin. While in Homer's Odyssey, the warrior Odysseus makes ritual burnt offerings to the gods, here Bloom thinks peacefully of offal as he makes breakfast for Molly.
Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. He liked thick giblet soup, nutty gizzards, a stuffed roast heart, liver slices fried with crust crumbs, fried hen cuds roes. Most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate a fine tang of faintly scented urine. Kidneys were in his mind as he moved about the kitchen softly, writing her breakfast things on the humpy tray. Gelid light and air were in the kitchen, but out of doors, gentle summer morning everywhere. Made him feel a bit peckish. The coals were reddening. Another slice of bread and butter. 3, 4, right. She didn't like her plate full. Right. He turned from the tray, lifted the kettle off the hob and sent it sideways on the fire. It sat there, dull and squat. Its spout stuck out. Cup of tea soon. Good. Mouth dry. The cat walked stiffly round a leg of the table with a tail on high. McNow! Oh, there you are, Mr. Bloom said, turning from the fire. The cat mewed in answer and stalked again stiffly round a leg of the table, mewing, just how she stalks over my table. Purr, scratch my head, purr. Mr. Bloom watched curiously, kindly the lithe black form, clean to see, the gloss of her sleek hide, the white button under the butt of her tail, the green flashing eyes. He bent down to her, his hands on his knees. Milk for the pussins, he said. But now, the cat cried.
Our next reader is Sean Griffin. Born in Limerick and raised in Seattle, Washington, Sean is an artist, a coach, and an actor with a long career in theatre and film. He'll read a passage from the 6th chapter of Ulysses, set in Glasnevin Cemetery. Bloom attends the funeral of a friend in Glasnevin and thinks about the dead and the living and the connections between the two. We might take this moment to remember a great Joycean in the English department at Berkeley, John Bishop. John died recently of COVID-19. Loved by many colleagues, students, and friends, He leaves a huge legacy, both personal and intellectual. His book, Joyce's Book of the Dark, is a milestone work on Finnegan's Wake.
How many? All these here once walked round Dublin, faithful departed, as you are now, so once were we. Besides, how could you remember everybody? Eyes, walk, voice. Well, the voice, yes, gramophone. Have a gramophone in every grave or keep it in the house. After dinner on a Sunday, put on poor old great-grandfather. Crack! Hello, hello, hello. I'm awfully glad, Crack. Awfully glad to see you again. Hello, hello. I'm off. Remind you of the voice, like the photograph reminds you of the face. Otherwise, you couldn't remember the face after 15 years, yes? For instance, who? For instance, some fella that died when I was in Wisdom Healy's. Rushtacha, a rattle of pebbles. Wait, stop. He looked down intently into a stone crypt. Some animal. Wait, there he goes. An obese grey rat toddled along the side of the crypt, moving the pebbles. An old stager, great-grandfather. He knows the ropes. The grey alive crushed itself in under the plinth, wriggled itself in under it. Good hiding place for treasure. Who lives there? Are laid the remains of Robert Emery. Robert Emmett was buried here by torchlight, wasn't he? Oh, making his rounds. Tail gone now. One of those chaps would make short work of a fella.
Our next reader is actor Thomas O'Leary, joining us from his pub T.C. O'Leary's in Portland, Oregon, where he leads the Ulysses support group. Tom grew up in Killiney, Dublin, and he might be known to you from his role as Dr. Brendan Daly in Fair City. He'll read now from the lunchtime episode of Ulysses. Bloom wanders through the streets of Dublin, wondering where to eat. He enters Burton's Red Bank restaurant on Lear Street and is revolted by the sight of men eating greedily at reduced prices.
His heart astir, he pushed in the door of the Burton restaurant. Stink gripped his trembling breath, pungent meat juice, slush of greens. See the animals feed. Men perched on high stools by the bar, hats shoved back, at the tables calling for more bread, no charge, swilling, wolfing gobfuls of sloppy food, their eyes bulging, wiping wetted moustaches. A pallid, suet-faced young man polished his tumbler, knife, fork, and spoon with his napkin. New set of microbes. A man with infant sauce-stained napkin tucked round his shoveled gurgling soup down his gullet. A man spitting back on his plate, half-masticated gristle. Gums, no teeth to chew it. Chop from the grill, bolting to get it over. Sad boozer's eyes, bitten off more than he can chew. Am I like that? See ourselves as others see us. Hungry man is an angry man, working tooth and jaw. A bone! The last pagan king of Ireland, Cormac, in the school poem choked himself at Sletty southward of the Boyne. Wonder what he was eating. Something voluptuous. St. Patrick converted him to Christianity. Couldn't swallow it, however. Roast beef and cabbage, one stew. Smells of men. His gorge rose, spat on sawdust, sweetish, warmish cigarette smoke, reek of plug, spilt beer, men's beery piss, the stale of ferment. Couldn't eat a morsel here. Fellow sharpening knife and fork to eat all before him. Old chap picking his tootles. Slight spasm, full, chewing the cud, before and after, grace after meals. Look on this picture, then on that. Scoffing up stew gravy with sopping sippets of bread. Lick it off the plate, man! Get out of this.
Our next reader is Jennifer Kenny. Jennifer Kenny is a business mentor, facilitator, and mobilizer, specializing in fostering innovation through diversity. Today, she'll read another excerpt from the lunchtime episode. In this passage, Bloom remembers a picnic he made with Molly on Howth Head, where she agreed to marry him. His memory of their joyful, intimate connection comforts him on this difficult day, during which Molly will take Blazes Boylan as her lover. As you'll hear later, Molly herself returns to this memory at the very end of the book.
Glowing wine on his palate lingered, swallowed, crushing in the winepress grapes of Burgundy. Sun's heat it is, seems to a secret touch telling me memory. Touched his sense, moistened, remembered, hidden under the wild ferns of Howth, below us bay, sleeping, sky, no sound. The sky, the bay purple by the Lion's Head, green by Drumleck, yellow-green towards Sutton, fields of undersea, the lines faint brown in grass, buried cities. Pillowed on my coat she had her hair, earwigs in the wet heather scrub, and my hand under her nape. You'll toss me all, a wonder. Cool, soft with ointments, her hand touched me, caressed. Her eyes upon me did not turn away. Ravished over her I lay, full lips open, kissed her mouth, young. Softly she gave me in my mouth the seed cake warm and chewed. Mawkish pulp her mouth had mumbled sweet sour of her spittle. Joy, I ate it, joy, young life, her lips that gave me pouting. Soft, warm, sticky gum jelly lips. Flowers her eyes were, take me, willing eyes. Pebbles fell, she lay still. A goat, no one. High on Ben Howth rhododendrons, a nanny goat walked sure-footed, dropping currants. Screened under ferns, she laughed warm-folded. Wildly I lay on her, kissed her, her eyes, lips, her stretched neck beating, women's breasts full in her blouse of nun's veiling, fat nipples upright. Hot I tongued her. She kissed me, I was kissed. All yielding, she tossed my hair. Kissed, she kissed me and me now.
Our next reader is Michael Treacy, Vice Consul of Ireland, San Francisco, and co-organizer of this event. He'll read to us the final passage from the Wandering Rocks episode of Ulysses. It describes the reactions of various Dubliners to the cavalcade of the Viceroy William Humble, Earl of Dudley, as it travels from the lodge in Phoenix Park, now Áras an Uachtaráin, to Ball's Bridge, where the Viceroy is set to formally open the Muiris Bazaar. Okay, this map is not historically accurate because traffic flow is different now across Dublin, but you get the idea. So the Muiris Bazaar didn't open on June 16th, but rather on May 31st. And the Viceroy and his wife did not make this procession with an entourage through the streets of Dublin. However, Joyce invents this official display of imperial power in order to imagine the responses of Dubliners, which range from admiring to mocking to oblivious.
William Humble, Earl of Dudley, and Lady Dudley, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Heseltine, drove out after luncheon from the Viceregal Lodge. In the following carriage were the Honourable Mrs. Paget, Miss de Courcy, and the Honourable Gerald Ward, ADC, in attendance. The cavalcade passed out by the lower gate of Phoenix Park, saluted by obsequious policemen, and proceeded past King's Bridge along the Northern Quays. The Viceroy was most cordially greeted on his way through the metropolis. From its sluice and wood quay wall under Tom Devon's office, Poddle River hung out in fealty, a tongue of liquid sewage. Above the cross blind of the Ormond Hotel, gold by bronze, Miss Kennedy's head by Miss Douce's head watched and admired. On Ormond Quay, Mr. Simon Dedalus, steering his way from the greenhouse for the sub-sheriff's office, stood still in mid-street and brought his hat low. His Excellency graciously returned Mr. Dedalus's greeting. John Henry Menton, filling the doorway of commercial buildings, stared from wine-big oyster eyes, holding a fat gold hunter watch, not looked at, in his fat left hand, not feeling it. Where the foreleg of King Billy's horse pawed the air, Mrs. Breen plucked her hastening husband back from under the hoofs of the outriders. She shouted in his ear the tidings. Understanding, he shifted his tomes to his left breast and saluted the second carriage. By the provost's wall came jauntily Blazes Boylan, stepping in tan shoes and socks with sky blue clocks to the refrain of "My Girl's a Yorkshire Girl." Blazes Boylan presented to the leaders sky blue frontlets and high action, a sky blue tie, a wide-brimmed straw hat at a rakish angle, and a suit of indigo serge. His hands in his jacket pockets forgot to salute, but he offered to the three ladies the bold admiration of his eyes and the red flower between his lips. At the Royal Canal Bridge from his hoarding, Mr. Eugene Stratton, his blub lips a grin, bade all comers welcome to Pembroke Township. At Haddington Road corner, two sanded women halted themselves, an umbrella and a bag, in which 11 cockles rose to view with wonder the Lord Mayor and Lady Mayoress without his golden chain. On Northumberland and Lansdowne roads, His Excellency acknowledged punctually salutes from rare male walkers, the salute of two small schoolboys at the garden gate of the house said to have been admired by the late Queen when visiting the Irish capital with her husband, the Prince Consort, in 1849, and the salute of Amadano Artifoni's dirty trousers, swallowed by a closing door.
Our next reader, Dan Blanton, is Associate Professor of English at UC Berkeley. Dan is a specialist in modernist literature and poetry. See his great book here, Epic Negation. The passage he'll read for us is one of 4 that we'll be hearing from the Cyclops episode. The chapter is set in the north side of Dublin, in Barney Kiernan's pub on Little Britain Street. There, Bloom encounters a fervent nationalist known as the Citizen, modelled on Michael Cusack, founder of the Gaelic Athletic Association. The Citizen owns a dog by the name of Gary Owen, which was also the name of a famous Irish setter of the time. In this chapter, the narrator's account of the conversations in the pub is interrupted multiple times by comic, parodic passages. Interrupting this passage, you'll hear a parody of 19th century translations of Irish legends. While we start on territory familiar to Celtic myth, you might notice the gradual inclusion of individuals not normally thought of as Irish.
So we turned into Barney Kiernan's, and there, sure enough, was the Citizen up in the corner having a great confab with himself and that bloody mangy mongrel, Gary Owen, and he waiting for what the sky would drop in the way of a drink. There he is, says I, in his glory hole, with his whisking lawn and his load of papers working for the cause. The bloody mongrel let a grouse out of him, would give you the creeps. Be a corporal work of mercy if someone would take the life of that bloody dog. I'm told for a fact he ate a good part of the breeches off a constabulary man in Santry that came round one time with a blue paper about a license. Stand and deliver, says he. That's all right, Citizen, says Joe. Friends here. Pass, friends, says he. Then he rubs his hand and his eye and says he, what's your opinion of the times? Doing the rapparee and Rory of the Hill, but begob Joe was equal to the occasion. I think the markets are on a rise, says he, sliding his hand down his fork. So begob the Citizen claps his paw on his knee and says, foreign wars is the cause of it. And says Joe, sticking his thumb in his pocket, it's the Russians wish to tyrannize. Ara, give over your bloody cotting, Joe, says I. I have a thirst on me I wouldn't sell for half a crown. Give it a name, Citizen, says Joe. Wine of the country, says he. What's yours, says Joe. Ditto, Macanaspia, says I. 3 pints, Terry, says Joe. And how's the old heart, Citizen, says he. Never better, Achara, says he. What, Gary? Are we going to win, eh? And with that he took the bloody old Towser by the scruff of the neck, and by Jesus he near throttled him. The figure seated on a large boulder at the foot of a round tower was that of a broad-shouldered, deep-chested, strong-limbed, frank-eyed, red-haired, freely freckled, shaggy-bearded, wide-mouthed, large-nosed, long-headed, deep-voiced, bare-kneed, brawny-handed, hairy-legged, ruddy-faced, sinewy-armed hero. From shoulder to shoulder he measured several ells, and his rock-like mountainous knees were covered, as was likewise the rest of his body, wherever visible, with a strong growth of tawny, prickly hair and hue and toughness, similar to the mountain gorse, Ulex europaeus. The wide-winged nostrils from which bristles of the same tawny hue projected were of such capaciousness that within their cavernous obscurity, the field lark might easily have lodged her nest. The eyes in which a tear and a smile strove ever for the mastery were of the dimensions of a good-sized cauliflower. A powerful current of warm breath issued at regular intervals from the profound cavity of his mouth, while in rhythmic resonance, the loud, strong, hail reverberations of his formidable heart thundered rumblingly, causing the ground, the summit of the lofty tower, and the still loftier walls of the cave to vibrate and tremble. He wore a long, unsleeved garment of recently flayed oxhide, reaching to the knees, in a loose kilt, and this was bound about his middle by a girdle of plaited straw and rushes. Beneath this, he wore trews of deerskin, roughly stitched with gut. His nether extremities were cased in high, while brigand buskins dyed in lichen purple, the feet being shod with brogues of salted cowhide, laced with the windpipe of the same beast. From his girdle hung a row of sea stones, which jangled at every movement of his portentous frame, and on these were graven with rude yet striking art the tribal images of many Irish heroes and heroines of antiquity. Cuchulainn, Conn of 100 battles, Niall of 9 hostages, Brian of Kincora, the Ardrey Malachi, Art McMurrough, Shane O'Neill, Father John O'Murphy, Owen Rowe, Patrick Sarsfield, Red Hugh O'Donnell, Red Jim McDermott, Soggarth Owen O'Growney, Michael Dwyer, Francie Higgins, Henry Joy McCracken, Goliath, Horace Wheatley, Thomas Conniff, Peg Woffington, the village blacksmith, Captain Moonlight, Captain Boycott, Dante Alighieri, Christopher Columbus, St. Versa, St. Brendan, Marshall McMahon, Charlemagne, Theobald Wolfe Tone, the mother of the Maccabees, the last of the Mohicans, the Rose of Castile, the man for Galway, the man that broke the bank at Monte Carlo, the man in the Gap, the woman who didn't, Benjamin Franklin, Napoleon Bonaparte, John L. Sullivan, Cleopatra, Severnine Delish, Julius Caesar, Paracelsus, Sir Thomas Lipton, William Tell, Michelangelo Hayes, Muhammad, the Bride of Lammermoor, Peter the Hermit, Peter the Packer, Dark Rosaline, Patrick W. Shakespeare, Brian Confucius, Murtagh Gutenberg, Patricio Velasquez, Captain Nemo, Tristan and Isolde, the first Prince of Wales, Thomas Cook and Son, the Bold Soldier Boy, Otter na Pogue, Dick Turpin, Ludwig Beethoven, the Colleen Bawn, Wadler Healy, Angus the Culdee, Dolly Mount, Sidney Parade, Ben Hoth, Valentine Great Breaks, Adam and Eve, Arthur Wellesley, Boss Crocker, Herodotus, Jack the Giant Killer, Gautama Buddha, Lady Godiva, the Lily of Killarney, Balor of the Evil Eye, the Queen of Sheba, Aki Nagel, Joe Nagel, Alessandra Volta, Jeremiah O'Donovan Rossa, Don Philip O'Sullivan Bear, the couch spear of acuminated granite, rested by him while at his feet reposed a savage animal of the canine tribe, whose stertorous gasps announced that he was sunk in uneasy slumber, a supposition confirmed by hoarse growls and spasmodic movements, which his master repressed from time to time by tranquilizing blows of a mighty cudgel rudely fashioned out of Paleolithic stone.
Our next reader, Catherine Bigelow, is a society columnist in San Francisco. This is a moment to remember Catherine's father, Thomas Bigelow, whose birthday fell on Bloomsday. He was a keen Joycean and spent 6 months very close to the end of his life studying Ulysses, which he considered one of his life's great accomplishments. Today, Catherine will read a passage in which the citizen denounces the British deforestation of Ireland and calls for the protection and propagation of Ireland's noble trees. The parodic section that follows takes the form of a society column description of a high society wedding, attended by grand trees from all over the world.
Hello. Unfortunately, my background doesn't, virtual background's not working, so please imagine a beautiful canopy of trees. Save them, says the citizen, the giant ash of Galway, and the chieftain elm of Kildare with a 40-foot bole and an acre of foliage. Save the trees of Ireland for the future men of Ireland on the fair hills of Ayr. Oh, Europe has its eyes on you, says Lenehan. The fashionable international world attended en masse this afternoon at the wedding of the Chevalier Jean-Louis du Noulon, Grand High Chief Ranger of the Irish National Foresters, with Miss Conifer of Pine Valley, Lady Sylvester Elmshade, Mrs. Barbara Lovebirch, Mrs. Paul Ash, Mrs. Holly Hazel Eyes, Miss Daphne Bays, Miss Dorothy Canebrake, Miss Clyde Twelvetrees, Miss Rowan Green, Miss Helen Vinegadding, Miss Virginia Creeper, Miss Gladys Beach, Miss Olive Garth, Miss Blanche Maple, Miss B. Honeysuckle, Miss Grape Poplar, Miss O Mimosa San, Miss Rachel Cedarfrond, the Mrs. Lillian and Viola Lilac, Miss Timidity Aspinall, Miss Kitty Dewey Moss, Miss May Hawthorne, Mrs. Gloriana Palm, Mrs. Leanna Forrest, Mrs. Arabella Blackwood, and Mrs. Norma Holyoke of Oldcombe Regis grace the ceremony by their presence. The bride, who was given away by her father, the McConifer of the Glens, looked exquisitely charming in a creation carried out in green mercerized silk, molded on an underslip of gloaming gray, sashed with a yoke of broad emerald and finished with a triple flounce of dark-hued fringe, the scheme being relieved by bretelles and hip insertions of acorn bronze. The maids of honor, Miss Larch Conifer and Miss Spruce Conifer, sisters of the bride, wore very becoming costumes in the same tone, a dainty motif of plume rose being worked into the pleats in a pinstripe and repeated capriciously in the jade green toques in the form of hair and feathers of pale tinted coral. Signor Enrique Flor presided at the organ with his well-known ability, and in addition to the prescribed numbers of the nuptial mass, played a new and striking arrangement of Woodman, Spare That Tree, at the conclusion of the service. On leaving the church of St. Ficra in Horto, after the papal blessing, the happy pair were subjected to a playful crossfire of hazelnuts, beech nuts, bay leaves, catkins of willow, ivy tod, holly berries, mistletoe sprigs, and quicken shoots. Mr. and Mrs. Weiss Conifer Nolan will spend a quiet honeymoon in the Black Forest.
Our next reader, Johnny O'Callaghan, is an actor, a writer, a therapist, and a citizen of Canada, Ireland, and the United States. In this passage, okay. In this passage from Cyclops, Bloom gets into a debate about the concept of nationality. His criticism of persecution prompts the men in the bar to ask him to define what a nation is. He offers alternative versions based on geography and ethnicity, and the jokers in the bar point out the problems of these definitions. Bloom goes on to draw attention to the more urgent problem of injustice and to the suffering caused by force and prejudice.
Bloom was talking and talking with John Joyce, and he, quite excited with his dun-duckety mud-coloured mug on him and his old plum eyes rolling about. Persecution, says he. All the history of the world is full of it. Perpetuate national hatred among nations. But do you know what a nation means, says John Joyce. Yes, says Bloom. What is it? A nation, says Bloom. A nation is the same people living in the same place. Boy, God damn, says Ned, laughing. If that's so, I'm a nation, for I'm living in the same place for the past 5 years. So, of course, everyone had to laugh at Bloom, and says he, trying to muck out of it, are also living in different places. That covers my case, says Joe. What is your nation, if I may ask, says the citizen. Ireland, says Bloom. I was born here, Ireland. The citizen said nothing, only cleared a spit out of his gullet, and Garby spat a red bank oyster out of it right in the corner. After you with the push, Joe, says he, taking out his handkerchief to swab himself dry. Here you are, citizen, says Joe. Take that in your right hand and repeat after me the following words. Show us over the drink, says I. Which is which? Oh, that's mine, says Joe, as the devil said to the dead policeman. And I belong to a race too, says Bloom, that is hated and persecuted. Also now, this very moment, this very instant. God, he near burnt his finger with the butt of his old cigar. Robbed, says Bloom, plundered, insulted, persecuted. Taken what belongs to us by right. At this very moment, says he, putting up his fist, sold by auction in Morocco, like slaves or cattle. Are you talking about the New Jerusalem? Says the citizen. I'm talking about injustice, says Bloom. Right, says John Joyce. Stand up to it then. With force, like men. That's an almanac picture for you. Mark for a soft-nosed bullet. Old lardy face. Standing up to the business end of a gun. Gob, he'd adorn a sweeping brush so he would. If he only had a nurse's apron on him. And then he collapses all of a sudden, twisting around. All the opposite, as limp as a wet rag. But it's no use, says Bloom. Force, hatred, history, all that. That's not life for men and women, insult and hatred. And everybody knows that it's the very opposite of that. That is really life. What? Says Alf. Love, says Bloom. I mean the opposite of hatred. We must go now, says he to John Joyce, just around to the court a moment to see if Martin is there. If he comes, just say I'll be back in a second. Just a moment. Who's hindering you? And off he pops like greased lightning. A new apostle to the Gentiles, says the citizen. Universal love. Well, says John Joyce, isn't that what we're told? Love your neighbour. That chap, says the citizen. Beggar my neighbour is his motto. Love my He's a nice pattern of a Romeo and Juliet. Love loves to love love. Norris loves the new chemist. Constable 14A loves Mary Kelly. Gertie McDowell loves the boy that has the bicycle. MB loves a fair gentleman. Lee Chi Han, lovey up kissy cha poo chow. Jumbo the elephant loves Alice the elephant. All Mrs. Fairskill with the ear trumpet loves all Mrs. Fairskill with the turned in eye. The man in the brown Macintosh loves a lady who is dead. His Majesty the King loves Her Majesty the Queen. Mrs. Norman W. Tupper loves Officer Taylor. You love a certain person, and this person loves the other person because everybody loves somebody. But God loves everybody.
Our next reader is Kimberly McClain DaCosta. Kimberly is Associate Professor of Sociology at New York University Gallatin Institute. Her book, Making Multiracials, State, Family and Market in the Redrawing of the Colour Line, explores the movement to create multiracial collective identity. She'll read the climax of this Cyclops episode. The citizen becomes infuriated with Bloom, who's rumoured to have given the ideas for Sinn Féin to Arthur Griffith. The men in the pub mistakenly think that Bloom has won a lot of money on a horse race and are angered that he hasn't been buying them drinks. Notice how he's referred to not by name, but by he.
So in comes Martin, asking where was Bloom. Where is he, says Lenehan? Defrauding widows and weapons. Isn't that a fact, says John Wise, what I was telling the citizen about Bloom and the Sinn Féin? That's so, says Martin, or so they allege. Who made those allegations, says Elf? I, says Joe. I'm the alligator. And after all, says John Wise, why can't a Jew love a country, his country like the next fellow? Why not, says JJ, when he's quite sure which country it is. Is he a Jew or a Gentile or a Holy Roman or a Swaddler? Or what the hell is he, says Ned? Or who is he? No offense, Crofton. Who is Junius, says JJ. We don't want him, says Crofton the Orangeman or Presbyterian. He's a perverted Jew, says Martin, from a place in Hungary, and it was he drew up all the plans according to the Hungarian system. We know that in the castle. Isn't he a cousin of Bloom the dentist, says Jack Power. Not at all, says Martin. Only namesakes. His name was Verag, the father's name that poisoned himself. He changed it by deed poll, the father did. That's the new Messiah for Ireland, says the citizen. Island of saints and sages. Well, they're still waiting for their Redeemer, says Martin. For that matter, so are we. Yes, says JJ, and every male that's born, they think it may be their Messiah. And every Jew is in a tall state of excitement, I believe, till he knows if he's a father or a mother, expecting every moment will be his next, says Lenehan. I was just looking around to see who the happy thought would strike, and be damned, but in Bloom comes again, letting on to be in a hell of a hurry. I was just round at the courthouse, says he, looking for you. I hope I'm not. No, says Martin, we're ready. Courthouse, my eye, and your pockets hanging down with gold and silver. Mean bloody scut. Stand us a drink itself. Devil a sweet fare. There's a Jew for you. All for number one. Cute as a shithouse rat. 100 to 5. Don't tell anyone, says the citizen. Beg your pardon, says he. Come on, boys, says Martin, seeing it was looking blue. Come along now. Don't tell anyone, says the citizen, letting a ball out of him. It's a secret. And the bloody dog woke up and let a growl. Bye-bye all, says Martin. And he got them out as quick as he could, Jack Power and Crofton, or whatever you call them, and him in the middle of them, letting on to be all at sea and up with them on the bloody John car. Off with you, says Martin to the Javi. But begob, I was just lowering the heel of the pint when I saw the citizen getting up to waddle to the door, puffing and blowing with the dropsy, and he cursing the curse of Cromwell on him, bell, book, and candle in Irish, spitting and spatting out of him. And Joe and little Alf round him like a leprechaun trying to peacify him. Let me alone, says he. And begob, he got as far as the door, and they holding him, and he bawls out of him, 3 chairs for Israel. Arrah, sit down on the parliamentary side of your ass for Christ's sake, and don't be making a public exhibition of yourself. Jesus, there's always some bloody clown or other kicking up a bloody murder about bloody nothing. Gob, it'd turn the port of sour in your guts, so it would. And all the ragamuffins and sluts of the nation round the door, and Martin telling the Jarvey to drive ahead, and the citizen bawling, and Alf and Joe at him to wish and he on his high horse about the Jews, and the loafers calling for a speech, and Jack Power trying to get him to sit down in the car and hold his bloody jaw, and with the loafer with a patch over his eyes starts singing, if the man in the moon was a Jew, Jew, Jew. And a slut shouts out of her, hey, mister, your fly is open, mister. And says he, Mendelssohn was a Jew, and Karl Marx, and Mercadante, and Spinoza, and the Savior was a Jew, and his father was a Jew, your God. He had no father, says Martin. That'll do now, drive ahead. Who's God, says the citizen. Well, his uncle was a Jew, says he. Your God was a Jew, Christ was a Jew, like me. God, the citizen made a plunge back into the shop. By Jesus, says he, I'll brand the bloody Jewman for using the holy name. By Jesus, I'll crucify him, so I will. Give us that biscuit box here. Stop, stop, says Joe. God, the devil wouldn't stop until he got hold of the bloody tin anyhow. And out with him and little Alf hanging onto his elbow. And he's shouting like a stuck pig, as good as any bloody play in the Queen's Royal Theater. Where is he till I murder him? And Ned and JJ paralyzed with the laughing. Bloody wars, says I, I'll be in it for the last gospel. But as luck would have it, the Jarvies got the nag's head round the other way and off with him. And the last we saw was the bloody car rounding the corner, an old sheep's face on it gesticulating, and the bloody mongrel after it with his lugs back for all he was bloody well worth, to tear him from limb, 100 to 5. Jesus, he took the value of it out of him, I promise you. When lo, there came about them all a great brightness, and they beheld the chariot, wherein he stood ascend to heaven, and they beheld him in the chariot, clothed upon in the glory of the brightness, having raiment as of the sun, fair as the moon, and terrible that for awe they durst not look upon him. And there came a voice out of heaven calling, Elijah, Elijah, and he answered with a main cry, Abba Adonai. And they beheld him, even him, Ben, Bloom, Elijah, amid clouds of angels, ascend to the glory of the brightness at an angle of 45 degrees over Donahoe's and Little Green Street, like a shot off a shovel.
Our next reader is Geraldine Flynn, who's Senior Director of People Strategy and Innovation at Twitter. She'll read a passage from the Nausicaa episode, which is set on Sandymount Strand. It features Gertie McDowell, a young fashion plate who mixes together notions of Irish beauty with more practical cosmetic advice from English women's magazines such as The Princess Novelette.
Gertie McDowell, who was seated near her companions, lost in thought, gazing far away into the distance, was, in very truth, as fair a specimen of winsome Irish girlhood as one could wish to see. She was pronounced beautiful by all who knew her, though, as folks often said, she was more a Giltrap than a McDowell. Her figure was slight and graceful, inclining even to fragility. But those iron geloids she had been taking of late had done her a world of good, much better than Widow Welch's female pills, and she was much better of those discharges she used to get and that tired feeling. The waxen pallor of her face was almost spiritual in its ivory-like purity, though her rosebud mouth was a genuine Cupid's bow. Greekly perfect. Her hands were a finely veined alabaster with tapering fingers and as white as lemon juice and queen of ointments could make them, though it was not true that she used to wear kid gloves in bed or take a milk foot bath either. Bertha Supple told that once to Edie Boardman, a deliberate lie, when she was blackout at daggers drawn with Gertie. The girl chums had, of course, their little tips from time to time, like the rest of mortals. And she told her not to let on, whatever she did, that it was her that told her, or she'd never speak to her again. No, honour where honour is due. There was an innate refinement, a languid, queenly hauteur about Gertie, which was unmistakably evidenced in her delicate hands and high-arched instep. Had kind fate but willed her to be born a gentlewoman of high degree in her own right, and had she only received the benefit of a good education, Gertie McDowell might easily have held her own beside any lady in the land, and have seen herself exquisitely gowned with jewels on her brow and patrician suitors at her feet, vying with one another to pay their devoirs to her. Mayhap it was this, the love that might have been, that lent to her softly featured face at whiles a look tense with suppressed meaning, that imparted a strange yearning tendency to the beautiful eyes, a charm few could resist. Why have women such eyes of witchery? Gertie's were of the bluest Irish blue, set off by lustrous lashes and dark expressive brows. Time was when those brows were not so silkily seductive. It was Madame Vera Verity, directress of the Woman Beautiful page of the Princess Novelette, who had first advised her to try eyebrow line, which gave that haunting expression to the eyes, so becoming in leaders of fashion, and she had never regretted it. Then there was blushing, scientifically cured, and how to be tall, increase your height. And you have a beautiful face, but your nose. That would suit Mrs. Dignam because she had a button one. But Gertie's crowning glory was her wealth of wonderful hair. It was dark brown with a natural wave in it. She had cut it that very morning on account of the new moon, and it nestled about her pretty head in a profusion of luxuriant clusters, and pared her nails too, Thursday for wealth. And just now, at Edie's words, as a telltale flush, delicate as the faintest rose bloom, crept into her cheeks, she looked so lovely in her sweet, girlish shyness, that of a surety, God's fair land of Ireland did not hold her equal.
Eric Falci is Professor of English at UC Berkeley, where he works on Irish and British poetry and Irish literature. He'll read to us the final passage of the Ithaca episode, the penultimate chapter of Ulysses, which Joyce called in reality the end of the novel. But this end offers no conclusion. Bloom returns home to 7 Eccles Street, but he falls asleep lying next to Molly top to tail, their bed described as in motion through space, while his identity drifts in a dreamlike fashion.
What moved visibly above the listeners and the narrator's invisible thoughts? The upcast reflection of a lamp and shade, an inconstant series of concentric circles of varying gradations of light and shadow. In what directions did listener and narrator lie? Listener, southeast by east. Narrator, northwest by west, on the 53rd parallel of latitude, north, and the 6th meridian of longitude, west, at an angle of 45 degrees to the terrestrial equator. In what state of rest or motion? At rest, relatively to themselves and to each other, in motion, being each and both carried westward, forward, and rearward, respectively, by the proper perpetual motion of the earth through ever-changing tracks of never-changing space. In what posture? Listener, reclined semi-laterally, left hand under head, right leg extended in a straight line and resting on left leg flexed, in the attitude of Gaia Tellus, fulfilled, recumbent, big with seed. Narrator, reclined laterally, left with right and left legs flexed, the index finger and thumb of the right hand resting on the bridge of the nose, in the attitude depicted in a snapshot photograph made by Percy Apjohn, the child man weary, the man-child in the womb. Womb? Weary? He rests. He has traveled. With Sinbad the sailor, and Tinbad the tailor, and Jinbad the jailer, and Winbad the whaler, and Nidbad the nailer, and Finbad the failer, and Binbad the bailer, and Pinbad the paler, and Minbad the mailer, and Hinbad the hailer, and Rinbad the railer, and Dinbad the caller, and Vinbad the queller, and Linbad the yaller, and Jinbad the flailer. When? Going to dark bed, there was a square, round, Sinbad the sailor roc's ox egg, in the night of the bed of all the ox of the rocks of Darkenbad, the bright daler. Where?
Our penultimate reader, Maura Nolan, is Associate Professor of English at UC Berkeley, where she works on late medieval literature. She'll read to us from the famous Penelope episode of Ulysses, the final chapter of the book. Lying in bed next to a sleeping Bloom, Molly's thoughts range free, moving from possibilities for transforming her home through things that she can buy in shops like Lambs and Findlater's and Lipton's, to a profound acceptance of the limits of existence.
We'll soon have the nuns ringing the Angelus. They've nobody coming in to spoil their sleep, except an odd priest or two for his night office, or the alarm clock next door at cockshout clattering the brains out of itself. Let me see if I can doze off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What kind of flowers are those they invented like the stars? The wallpaper in Lombard Street was much nicer. The apron he gave me was like that, something, only I only wore it twice. Better lower this lamp and try again, so as I can get up early. I'll go to Lamb's there beside Findlater's and get them to send us some flowers to put about the place in case he brings him home. Tomorrow. Today, I mean. No, Friday's an unlucky day. First, I want to do the place up some way. The dust grows in it, I think, while I'm asleep. Then we can have music and cigarettes. I can accompany him. First, I must clean the keys of the piano with milk. What'll I wear? Shall I wear a white rose? Or those fairy cakes in Lipton's? I love the smell of a rich, big shop. At 7.5 pence a pound, or the other ones with the cherries in them and the pinky sugar, 11 pence. A couple of pounds of those, a nice plant for the middle of the table. I'd get that cheaper and, wait, where's this? I saw them not long ago. I love flowers. I'd love to have the whole place swimming in roses. God of heaven, there's nothing like nature. The wild mountains, then the sea, and the waves rushing, then the beautiful country with the fields of oats and wheat and all kinds of things, and all the fine cattle going about. That would do your heart good, to see rivers and lakes and flowers, all sorts of shapes and smells and colors springing up, even out of the ditches, primroses and violets. Nature it is. As for them saying there's no God, I wouldn't give a snap of my 2 fingers for all their learning. Why don't they go and create something? I often asked him. Atheists, or whatever they call themselves, go and wash the cobbles off themselves first. Then they go howling for the priest, and they dying. And why? Why? Because they're afraid of hell on account of their bad conscience. Ah, yes, I know them well. Who was the first person in the universe, before there was anybody, that made it all? Who? Ah, that they don't know. Neither do I, so there you are. They might as well try to stop the sun from rising tomorrow.
Our final reader is Carolyn Morahan, a Los Angeles-based actor, television host of programs The Fame Game and Off the Rails. She's also appeared in a multitude of television programs. Carolyn will read the final passage of Penelope, in which Molly thinks back to that picnic she shared with Bloom on Howth Head. Remembering her girlhood in Gibraltar, where her father served in the British Army, Molly reaffirms her promise to Bloom, which is not just an affirmation of her marriage to him, but also a profound affirmation of life.
The sun shines for you, he said. The day we were lying among the rhododendrons on Howth Head, in the grey tweed suit and a straw hat. The day I got him to propose to me, yes. First I gave him the bit of seed cake out of my mouth, and it was a leap year like now. Yes, 16 years ago, my God. After that long kiss, I near lost my breath, yes. He said I was a flower of the mountain, yes. So we are flowers all, a woman's body, yes. That was the one true thing he said in his life. And the sun shines for you today, yes. That was why I liked him, because I saw he understood or felt what a woman is, and I knew I could always get round him. And I gave him all the pleasure I could, leading him on till he asked me to say yes. And I wouldn't answer first, only looked out over the sea and the sky. I was thinking of so many things he didn't know of. Mulvey and Mr. Stanhope and Hester and father and old Captain Groves and the sailors playing All Birds Fly and I Say Stoop and washing up dishes, they called it, on the pier, and the sentry in front of the governor's house with the thing round his white helmet, poor devil, half roasted, and the Spanish girls laughing in their shawls and their tall combs, and the auctions in the morning, the Greeks and the Jews and the Arabs and the devil knows who else from all the ends of Europe, and Duke Street and the foul market all clucking outside Larby Sharon's, and the poor donkeys slipping half asleep, and the vague fellows in the cloaks asleep in the shade on the steps, and the big wheels of the carts of the bulls, and the old castle, thousands of years old, yes, and those handsome Moors all in white, and turbans like kings, asking you to sit down in their little bit of a shop, and Rhonda, with the old windows of the posadas, 2 glancing eyes, a lattice hid for her lover to kiss the iron, and the wine shops, half opened at night, and the castanets. Oh, and the night we missed the boat at Algeciras, the watchman going about serene with his lamp, and oh, that awful deep down torrent. Oh, and the sea, crimson sometimes like fire, and the glorious sunsets, and the fig trees in the Alameda Gardens, yes, and all the queer little streets, and the pink and blue and yellow houses, and the rose gardens and the jessamine and geraniums and cactuses, and Gibraltar as a girl, where I was a flower of the mountain, yes, when I put the rose in my hair, like the Andalusian girls used. Or shall I wear a red? Yes. And how he kissed me under the Moorish wall. And I thought, well him as another. And then I asked him, with my eyes, to ask again, yes. And then he asked me, would I, yes, to say yes, my mountain flower. And first I put my arms around him, yes, and drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts all perfume, yes. And his heart was going like mad. And yes, I said, yes, I will, yes.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you to all of our readers, our wonderful readers. It's been such a pleasure to host this event. And thank you, our audience, for spending this time with us today on Bloomsday. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, wherever you are around the world. Thank you and goodbye.